Standing beside the champagne fountain at my cousin's engagement party, I watched my mother throw her head back in laughter. "Amelia's mysterious fiancé," she announced to the circle of relatives, making air quotes with perfectly manicured fingers. "2 years together, and we've never met him once. Tell us, sweetheart, is he invisible?" My father joined in, raising his glass. "Maybe he's camera shy. Or maybe," he paused for effect, "he doesn't exist at all." The crowd erupted in laughter. I said nothing. I just checked my phone and smiled. The thing is, I understood why they doubted. 2 years is a long time to be with someone your family has never met. But understanding their skepticism didn't make their mockery hurt any less. I met Marcus Sullivan at a medical conference in Geneva 2 years ago. I was there representing Boston Children's Hospital, where I work as a pediatric nurse. He was there presenting research on trauma care in conflict zones. During a coffee break between sessions, we literally collided near the pastry table. He apologized profusely in that distinctly American accent that stood out among all the European attendees. We started talking, and 4 hours later, we were still in that conference hall, long after everyone else had left. Marcus is a humanitarian doctor with Doctors Without Borders. He spends 8 to 10 months every year in places most people only see on the news. South Sudan, Yemen, Syria. Places where children are caught in the crossfire of wars they didn't start. Where families are torn apart by violence they never asked for. He performs surgeries in makeshift operating rooms, saves lives with limited supplies, and rebuilds hospitals that have been bombed. Our relationship has been unconventional from the start. Long distance doesn't begin to describe it. We communicate through satellite phone calls when he has signal. We video chat when the internet connection at whatever refugee camp he's working in decides to cooperate. We count the days until his brief visits home, those precious 2 or 3 weeks when he flies back to the States for rest and to see me. 6 months ago, during one of those visits, he proposed. He showed up at my apartment in Boston at 3 a.m, straight from the airport, still wearing the dust from a Sudanese village on his boots. He didn't have a ring yet. He just had this look in his eyes, exhausted but determined, and he said, "Amelia, I don't want to spend another day without you being my wife. I know my life is complicated, but marry me, please." Of course I said yes. My parents, Gerald and Patricia Harper, are Boston socialites. Old money, country club memberships, charity galas where they write checks and take photos for the society pages. They've spent my entire life trying to mold me into their vision of success. They wanted me to marry someone from their social circle, someone whose family they could invite to dinner parties, someone with a predictable 9-to-5 job and a respectable pedigree. When I told them about Marcus, they were polite at first, interested even. But as the months went by and he never appeared at Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, or any family gathering, their interest turned to suspicion. He missed Thanksgiving because of an emergency at a refugee camp where an outbreak of violence had injured dozens. He missed Christmas because a cholera outbreak required all hands on deck. He missed Easter because he literally could not leave his patients, children who would die without his care. My parents decided he was a convenient excuse, a fantasy id invented to avoid their endless attempts to set me up with the sons of their friends, the lawyers, the investment bankers, the trust fund babies who wore designer suits and talked about stock portfolios. Now, standing at my cousin Brandon's engagement party at this upscale country club overlooking Long Island Sound, I watched that suspicion transform into public entertainment. The terrace was decorated with white roses and twinkling lights. 80 guests mingled in cocktail attire, sipping expensive wine and pretending to care about the couple's love story. My cousin Brandon was marrying Stephanie, a corporate lawyer with an impressive resume and an even more impressive engagement ring. My younger sister, Caroline, stood near the bar with her husband Trevor, an investment banker with slicked-back hair and a permanent smirk. She caught my eye and gave me this pitying look, the kind you'd give someone who's clearly delusional, but you're too polite to say it out loud. That's when my mother really got going. "Seriously, Amelia," she said, loud enough for half the terrace to hear. 2 years and not a single photo? Not one family dinner? Come on, even you have to admit this is getting ridiculous. My father chimed in, swirling his scotch. Your mother and I are genuinely concerned. This level of, shall we say, imagination at your age is worrying. Aunt Judith, my father's sister, suddenly appeared at my mother's elbow. She was wearing a dress 2 sizes too small and a pearl necklace that probably cost more than my car. Patricia, dear, I've been thinking the same thing. Has Amelia seen anyone? Professionally, I mean. The word hung in the air like a slap. Professional help, my father agreed, nodding slowly. I think that's exactly what we're looking at here. They weren't teasing anymore. This wasn't gentle family ribbing. They were genuinely suggesting, in front of dozens of people, that I was mentally unwell, that I'd fabricated an entire relationship because I was lonely or broken or both. My cousin Brandon looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight and cleared his throat, but he said nothing. Stephanie, his fiancée, touched his arm and whispered something, but he just shook his head. Around me, relatives were pulling out their phones. Not to help or defend me, to text about the drama unfolding at the engagement party. I could see the screens glowing, fingers flying over keyboards. By tomorrow, this would be the talk of the entire extended family. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, that familiar burn of humiliation, but I kept my face neutral. I'd learned over the years that showing emotion to my parents only gave them more ammunition. I excused myself quietly and headed to the bathroom. Inside the marble and gold restroom that probably cost more than most people's homes, I locked myself in a stall and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking as I typed. They don't believe you're real. How far out are you? The response came within seconds. That distinct ping of a satellite message coming through. 15 minutes. Don't worry, love. This ends today. I stared at those words, and for the first time all evening, I allowed myself a real smile. When I returned to the terrace, things had somehow gotten worse. My mother had gathered an even larger audience. She stood near the edge of the terrace, holding court like she was hosting her own talk show, and I was the featured topic. The thing that worries me most, she was saying to a group of about 15 relatives and family friends, is that Amelia genuinely seems to believe this person exists. It's not just a story anymore. She's convinced herself. My father had joined her, playing the role of concerned parent perfectly. We've tried to be supportive. We've given her space, time, the benefit of the doubt. But it's been 2 years. No photos, no meetings, no proof whatsoever. At some point, you have to face reality. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching them dissect my life like I wasn't even there. Aunt Helen, Brandon's mother, nodded sympathetically. Have you considered that maybe she's using this story to avoid admitting she's struggling with dating? It's less embarrassing to have a long-distance boyfriend than to admit you're alone. Several people murmured in agreement. Caroline appeared beside me, her voice low but not low enough. Mel, maybe you should just admit the truth. There's no shame in being single, but this whole charade is getting sad. I looked at my sister. This person I'd shared a childhood with, who knew my favorite color and my biggest fears and the scar on my knee from when I fell off my bike at age 7. And she was standing there, publicly suggesting I was lying. "Hez real, Caroline," I said quietly. She just sighed and shook her head like I was a child insisting Santa Claus existed. Brandon's fiancée, Stephanie, tried to change the subject. She stepped forward with a bright smile. So, has anyone tried the shrimp? The caterers outdid themselves. But Aunt Helen cut her off. Stephanie, dear, this is a family matter. We need to address this. Amelia needs help, and pretending everything is fine isn't kindness. The conversation spiraled from there. Uncle Robert, a corporate attorney with a voice that could fill a courtroom, decided to play investigator. Amelia, he said, turning to face me directly. Let's approach this logically. What's your fiancé's full name? Marcus Sullivan, I answered. Where does he live? He doesn't have a permanent address. His work takes him all over the world. Uncle Robert raised an eyebrow. How convenient. And his phone number? Satellite phone. It changes depending on where he's stationed. The crowd was growing. More people were drifting over, drinks in hand, eager to watch the show. Satellite phone. Uncle Robert repeated slowly. So there's no way to reach him or verify he exists. He exists, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Someone in the crowd, I think it was my mother's friend Diana, pulled out her phone. What's his last name again? Sullivan? Let me check Facebook. Others joined in. Phones suddenly everywhere, fingers swiping and tapping. No Facebook profile, Diana announced. Nothing on Instagram either, someone else added. I can't find a LinkedIn. Another voice called out. I closed my eyes briefly. He doesn't use social media. For security reasons. He works in conflict zones where being traceable online could literally get him killed. The explanation was met with skeptical looks and barely suppressed eye rolls. Of course he doesn't, my mother said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. How very convenient that your mystery man is completely untraceable. That's when my father decided to make it official. He stood up, walked to the center of the terrace, and tapped his glass with a spoon. The clear, sharp sound cut through the conversation, and everyone turned to look. Excuse me, everyone, he said, his voice carrying across the terrace. I know we're here to celebrate Brandon and Stephanie's wonderful engagement, and well, get back to that in just a moment. But since we're all family here, I think we need to have an honest conversation. My stomach dropped. My daughter Amelia has been telling us for 2 years about a fiancé. A man named Marcus Sullivan. A man who, despite our best efforts, none of us have ever met. A man who has no social media presence, no fixed address, and no way to be contacted. 80 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. As her father, I'm deeply concerned. I think Amelia may be going through something difficult, and as a family, we need to support her. Fabricating a relationship is a cry for help, and I want my daughter to know that we're here for her, no matter what she's struggling with. He raised his glass, and I watched in horror as several people nodded along, raising their own glasses in a toast to my supposed mental breakdown. The humiliation was complete. In front of every relative, every family friend, every person who would talk about this for years to come, my father had just announced that I was delusional. I stood frozen, my face burning, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then I heard it. Faint at first, but growing louder. A rhythmic thumping sound, like distant thunder but mechanical. The unmistakable sound of helicopter blades cutting through the air. Several guests looked up at the sky, confusion replacing judgment on their faces. Is that a helicopter? Someone asked. The sound grew louder, closer, impossible to ignore. I pulled out my phone. One new message from Marcus. Landing in 2 minutes. I love you, Mrs. Sullivan. Mrs. Sullivan. My heart skipped. Head called me by his last name, something Wed only joked about before. I looked up at my father, at my mother, at all the relatives who'd spent the last hour tearing me apart, and I smiled. You should all look up, I said calmly, in about 60 seconds. My mother frowned. What are you talking about? You wanted to meet Marcus, I said, my voice steady and clear. Hez here! My father actually laughed. Right, your imaginary fiancé is arriving by helicopter. Amelia, this fantasy of yours has gotten out of hand. Actually, I said, his family owns Sullivan Medical Technologies. You might have heard of them. They manufacture surgical equipment. But Marcus chooses to work in refugee camps instead of running the company. So yes, the helicopter is his. Uncle Robert's face changed. Sullivan Medical Technologies? The company that supplies half the hospitals on the East Coast. That's a billion-dollar company, Aunt Helen said, her voice suddenly much quieter. The helicopter appeared over the tree line, a sleek black machine against the evening sky. The sound was deafening now, drowning out the music from the party speakers. Country club staff members rushed out of the building, waving their arms frantically, clearly not expecting an aircraft to land on their property. The helicopter began its descent toward the large lawn area adjacent to the terrace. The downdraft from the rotors sent napkins flying, knocked over centerpieces, and whipped hair into faces. Women grabbed their dresses. Men held onto their drinks. Every single person at the party was staring now. Phones were up, recording, capturing every moment. I stood perfectly still, arms crossed, watching my family's faces transform from smug superiority to shock to something that looked a lot like fear. My father and mother had gone pale. My mother's mouth was actually hanging open. The helicopter touched down gently on the grass. The blades began to slow but didn't stop completely. The door opened, and Marcus stepped out. He looked exactly like himself, tall, broad-shouldered, with that easy confidence that comes from saving lives in impossible conditions. He was wearing jeans, a crisp white button-down shirt, and a leather jacket. His brown hair was slightly messy from the flight, and his skin was tanned from months in the African sun. He carried a massive bouquet of white orchids, my favorite flower, something I'd mentioned to him once in passing 8 months ago. Behind him, the co-pilot began unloading packages. Wrapped gifts, a large floral arrangement, boxes stacked on a small wheeled cart. Marcus walked across the lawn toward the terrace like he owned the place. Not arrogant, just assured. Head performed surgery in war zones. A country club in Connecticut wasn't going to intimidate him. He walked right past my parents without a glance, walked past the relatives who'd been mocking me minutes before, walked straight to me. "Hello, my love," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "I'm so sorry I'm late." Then he kissed me. Not a polite peck, a real kiss. The kind that makes it very clear exactly what we are to each other. In front of all 80 guests. In front of my parents. In front of everyone who'd called me delusional. When he pulled back, he smiled at me. That crooked smile that made my heart flip. And then he got down on one knee. The entire terrace gasped. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. Inside was a ring, different from the simple engagement band Head given me 6 months ago. This one was stunning, an emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light. "Amelia Rose Harper," he said, his voice carrying across the silent terrace. "I know I already asked you to marry me 6 months ago, and you said yes, but I wanted to do this properly, in front of your family. So there's no doubt in anyone's mind about what we mean to each other." He looked around at the crowd, making eye contact with my parents, with my sister, with Uncle Robert. "Will you marry me? Again? Officially? In front of all these witnesses?" Tears were streaming down my face now. "Marcus," I said, my voice shaking. "We're already married." The gasps were louder this time. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered on the terrace stones, but no one even looked. Marcus grinned, standing up and pulling me into his arms. "I know we are, but your family didn't believe I existed, so I thought we should make it very, very clear." He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a folded document. He walked over to my father and handed it to him. "We got married 3 months ago at the courthouse in Boston, just the two of us, because I had only 48 hours before I had to return to South Sudan, and we didn't want to wait. That's our marriage certificate. Official, legal, notarized." My father took the paper with shaking hands. My mother leaned over his shoulder to read it. I watched the blood drain from both their faces as they realized it was real. All of it. Real. The country club manager was running toward us, clearly furious about the unauthorized helicopter landing, but Marcus turned to him with a calm smile. "I apologize for the disruption. I'll cover any damages and pay whatever fines are necessary. I needed to be here for my wife." The manager stopped short. "Your wife?" Marcus pulled me close. "Yes, my wife." Then he turned to Brandon and Stephanie, who were standing frozen near the champagne fountain, and his entire demeanor changed. The intensity softened into genuine warmth. "Congratulations on your engagement," he said, gesturing to the co-pilot, who wheeled the cart of gifts forward. "I brought something for you both." He handed them an envelope first. Stephanie opened it with trembling fingers and read the card inside. Her eyes widened. "A donation has been made in your names to the International Rescue Committee," Marcus explained. $25,000. I know how important humanitarian work is, and I wanted to honor your union by helping others." Brandon looked stunned. "That's incredibly generous." "And," Marcus continued, handing them a larger box, "because I know Amelia would want your special day to be perfect, this is for your honeymoon. A week at a resort in Bali, all expenses paid. Flights, accommodations, everything." Stephanie started crying. "We can't accept this. This is too much. Please," Marcus said gently. "Your family, and from what Amelia's told me, you're good people. That matters." Then he turned to face my parents, and his expression shifted again. Still polite, but there was steel underneath now. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper," he said formally, "I understand you have concerns about my relationship with your daughter." My father tried to speak, but Marcus held up a hand. "I'm sorry I haven't been able to meet you before now. My work keeps me overseas most of the year. I'm a trauma surgeon with Doctors Without Borders. I specialize in pediatric care in conflict zones." He pulled out his phone and held it up, showing photos. "This is the hospital where I currently work in South Sudan. These are some of the children we've saved in the last 6 months alone. This little girl, her name is Amina. She's 5 years old. She stepped on a landmine. I spent 11 hours reconstructing her leg. She's walking now." Several guests moved closer to see the photos. I watched faces change as they saw images of Marcus in scrubs, covered in blood and sweat, surrounded by injured children. "I realize my career isn't conventional," Marcus continued. "I realize it's caused doubt and confusion. I'm sorry that my absence from family events made you think I wasn't real. But I assure you, I'm very real. And I love your daughter more than anything in this world." From the cart, he pulled out 2 more wrapped boxes. He handed one to my mother. "This is for you, Mrs. Harper." My mother opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a medical journal, the kind you'd find in university libraries. Marcus' photo was on the cover, next to the title of a featured article head written about trauma care in humanitarian crises. "I've published 17 peer-reviewed papers on emergency medicine," Marcus said. "That's the most recent one. I thought you might want to know what I actually do." He handed the second box to my father. Inside was a thick photo album. My father opened it slowly, and I saw his hands tremble as he flipped through pages. It was an album Marcus had made of us. Photos from our 2 years together. Me and Marcus at a cafe in Geneva after that first conference. Marcus visiting me in Boston, both of us laughing on the common. Me visiting him during one of his brief stateside training sessions. Screenshots from our video calls. His face on a phone screen with a refugee camp visible behind him. My face in my scrubs after a shift at the hospital. 2 years of relationship, documented and real. "I know you thought I didn't exist," Marcus said quietly. "I understand why. But I've loved your daughter since the day we met at a medical conference 2 years ago. She's the most compassionate, brilliant, strong person I've ever known. And I consider myself the luckiest man alive that she chose me." My mother was crying now. Real tears. Not the performative kind she used at charity galas. My father just stared at the photo album, his face a mixture of shock and shame. The entire terrace was silent, except for the distant sound of the helicopter's rotors still turning. And then my father spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were listening, weren't you? Earlier. You heard everything we said." Marcus didn't flinch. "I was on a video call with Amelia when you started questioning her sanity. I heard every word." The silence that followed was suffocating. 80 people stood frozen, watching my father process what Marcus had just said. "You heard," my father repeated, the words coming out strangled. "I heard you call her delusional," Marcus said, his voice steady but cold. "I heard you suggest she needed psychiatric help. I heard you announce to an entire party that your daughter was fabricating a relationship because she was lonely or broken or both. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. I was sitting in a hospital tent in South Sudan, Marcus continued, trying to catch 15 minutes of sleep between surgeries, when Amelia called me crying. She wanted to tell me about the party, about seeing family she hadn't seen in a while. And instead, I heard her family tear her apart. He looked around at the crowd, making deliberate eye contact with people who'd laughed earlier. Do you know what real mental health struggles look like? I work with refugees who've survived genocides, children who've watched their parents murdered in front of them, women who've been assaulted and traumatized and displaced from everything they've ever known, and you people, his voice hardened, joke about someone needing psychiatric help? You weaponize mental health concerns to humiliate someone at a party. Aunt Judith, who had been one of the loudest voices earlier, suddenly found her shoes very interesting. We were just, she started, but Marcus cut her off. You were cruel, he said simply. There's no other word for it. You publicly humiliated a woman who dedicates her life to caring for sick children, who works 12-hour shifts in a pediatric ICU, who holds dying children's hands when their parents can't be there. You did that for entertainment. Aunt Judith's face crumpled. She turned and walked away, her husband following. Uncle Robert tried a different approach, switching into lawyer mode. Now, let's all take a breath. We're family. Misunderstandings happen. Let's not blow this out of proportion. Marcus turned to him slowly. You cross-examined my wife like she was a criminal on trial. You demanded proof, interrogated her, tried to catch her in a lie. That's what you do for a living, isn't it? Break people down until they crack. Uncle Robert had no response. And you, Marcus said, looking at my sister Caroline, who'd been standing silently near the bar. You've been telling your parents for 6 months that Amelia is making up stories for attention. Caroline's face went white. I never said that. Show them, Amelia, Marcus said gently. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. I'd saved the text messages Caroline had sent to our mother, thinking someday I might need them. I didn't want to believe my own sister would betray me like that, but some part of me had known. I held up the phone so my parents could see. Text after text from Caroline to my mother. Mel is definitely lying about this boyfriend. She's probably lonely and embarrassed. We should stage an intervention. This is getting pathetic. Has she always been this desperate for attention? Maybe if Shed tried harder to meet someone suitable, she wouldn't have to invent a fantasy. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. She looked at Caroline with complete shock. You told me you were worried about your sister. That you were concerned for her well-being. Caroline's face was bright red. I was worried. I am worried. Marcus' voice was like ice. Or were you jealous that Amelia found someone who loves her for who she is? Not for her social status or her family's money. That's not fair, Caroline protested, but her voice was weak. Isn't it? Marcus challenged. Amelia told me how you've spent years competing with her. How you married Trevor partly because your parents approved of his pedigree. How you've always needed to be the successful one, the perfect one, the one who did everything right. Trevor, Caroline's husband, was inching away from her, clearly wanting no part of this conversation. And when your sister found happiness with someone who actually sees her, who values her work and her compassion instead of just her appearance at social functions, you couldn't stand it. So you undermined her. To your own parents. For months. Caroline's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't find it in me to feel sorry for her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The crowd of guests had grown restless. Some people were slipping away, heading to their cars, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding. Others stayed, transfixed, phones still recording everything. Brandon finally found his voice. He stepped forward, his face flushed. Dad, this isn't right. What you did to Amelia, it wasn't just teasing. It was cruel. His father started to respond, but Brandon kept talking. I should have said something earlier. When Aunt Judith started talking about professional help, when Uncle Robert started interrogating her. I should have stood up for her. I didn't, and am sorry. Stephanie squeezed his hand, clearly proud of him for speaking up. Then Marcus addressed the crowd again, his voice carrying across the terrace. Since many of you are family, I want to formally announce that Amelia and I are already married. We got married 3 months ago because I had limited time stateside and we didn't want to wait. But we're planning a celebration ceremony in 3 months, at my family's estate in Cape Cod. He pulled out 2 envelopes from his jacket and handed them to my parents. These are your invitations. You're welcome to attend, if you can accept and respect our marriage. My mother was openly sobbing now. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 20 minutes. But understand something, Marcus continued, his voice firm. You come as guests, not as controllers. You don't get to plan it, change it, or criticize it. You come to celebrate and support us, or you don't come at all. Those are the only options. He turned back to me, his expression softening completely. Can we go somewhere and talk? Just us. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As we started to walk away, my father called out, Amelia, wait, please. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. About everything. I know, I said quietly. Then Marcus and I walked away, leaving my parents standing in the wreckage of what they'd done. We found a quiet corner of the terrace, away from the crowd. Marcus pulled me into his arms, and I finally let myself cry. Not sad tears, releasing tears. All the tension, the humiliation, the pain of the last 2 years of not being believed, it all came pouring out. I'm sorry I was so dramatic, he murmured against my hair. I know you hate big scenes. I pulled back and looked at him. Are you kidding? That was perfect. You were perfect. How did you even get here so fast? I was supposed to stay in South Sudan for another 3 weeks, he said. But when I heard what they were doing to you, I called in every favor I had. A friend of mine has a helicopter charter service. I landed in New York 4 hours ago, showered at a hotel, grabbed the gifts I'd been saving for your family, and came straight here. You must be exhausted. I am, he admitted. But I had to be here. I had to make sure they understood that you're not alone, that you're not making anything up, that you're loved completely and absolutely. I kissed him, tasting salt from my tears. I love you so much. I love you too, Mrs. Sullivan. I laughed through my tears. So we're going with that now. If you want to. Or you can keep Harper, or hyphenate. I don't care what name you use, as long as I get to be your husband. We stayed there for a few minutes, just holding each other, while the party continued in chaos behind us. Then Brandon and Stephanie approached cautiously. Amelia, Brandon said, I'm really sorry. About my dad? About not speaking up sooner. That was wrong on every level. Thank you, I said. And congratulations. Really. I'm happy for you both. Stephanie hugged me. You're always welcome at our wedding. Both of you. And Marcus, thank you so much for the gifts. You didn't have to do that, especially after what just happened. Marcus smiled. You two seem like good people. I hope your marriage is filled with the respect and trust that every relationship deserves. They exchanged contact information, and I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe not all of my family was lost. Other relatives started approaching, some with genuine apologies, others clearly just wanting to get close to the man with the helicopter and the billion-dollar family name. Marcus was polite to everyone, but I could feel him evaluating each person, determining who was sincere and who was just impressed by his wealth. One aunt, my mother's sister Agnes, actually gushed. We had no idea Amelia had married so well. Marcus' response was perfectly calibrated to sting. She married a doctor who spends most of his time in refugee camps. The fact that my family has money is completely irrelevant to our relationship. If anything, I wish people paid less attention to it. Agnes looked embarrassed and quickly excused herself. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, my parents approached. They looked shattered. My mother spoke first, her voice thick with tears. "Amelia, sweetheart, I don't even know how to begin apologizing. We were horrible to you, unspeakably horrible. We thought we were protecting you." My father added quickly, "We thought someone was taking advantage of you, or that you were being catfished, or something. We never imagined." Marcus cut him off, his voice cold. "You never imagined that your daughter was telling the truth? That Shed found someone who genuinely cares about her? What does that say about how you see her?" My father flinched. "I was on a video call with Amelia," Marcus continued. "Shed called to share something funny that happened at work, and then you started in on her. I heard everything, the mockery, the suggestions about her mental health, the public announcement to 80 people that she was delusional. We were wrong," my mother whispered. "Completely, utterly wrong." "Yes, you were," I said, finding my voice. "You were cruel, and you did it publicly, in front of everyone, because embarrassing me in private wasn't enough. How do we fix this?" my father asked, and I heard genuine desperation in his voice. "Tell us what to do. How do we make this right?" I looked at Marcus, then back at my parents. "You start by respecting my boundaries," I said firmly. "Marcus and I are married. We make our own decisions about our life. You don't get to control or criticize anymore." "Of course," my father said immediately. "Whatever you need. And you need to apologize to me publicly, the same way you humiliated me publicly." My mother nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yes, absolutely. Right now, I confirmed. We walked back to the main party area. Most guests had stayed, unable to resist the drama. The terrace had that electric feeling of people who knew they were witnessing something they'd talk about for years. My father raised his hand, getting everyone's attention. The conversations died down. "Everyone, I need to say something important. I owe my daughter a public apology." The terrace went silent. "Earlier tonight, I questioned Amelia's honesty and her mental health in front of all of you. I suggested she was fabricating a relationship, that she needed psychiatric help, that she was delusional." His voice cracked. "I was completely wrong. Amelia has been telling the truth all along. She's married to a remarkable man who dedicates his life to saving others. And instead of being proud of her, instead of trusting her, I humiliated her." He looked directly at me. "Amelia, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I let my own prejudices and expectations blind me to who you really are and what you've built. I was a terrible father today. I hope someday you can forgive me." My mother stepped forward. "I'm sorry, too. I participated in mocking you, in doubting you, in making your life harder instead of easier. You're an incredible nurse. You save children's lives every day, and you married a man who shares your values and your compassion. I'm ashamed of how I treated you." Some guests applauded awkwardly. Others just looked uncomfortable. Caroline stood in the back, arms crossed, not joining in. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase what they'd done, but it was something. Marcus checked his watch. "I have to get back to the airport. I have 3 surgeries scheduled tomorrow. I pushed every limit to get here." "Already?" I asked, my heart sinking. "I'm sorry, love, but I had to be here for you, even if it's just for a few hours." We walked toward the helicopter together, hand in hand. My father called out behind us, "Will we see you at the ceremony?" "In 3 months." I paused. "That depends on whether you can show us real change, not just words. Action." My mother's voice was small. "We love you, Amelia. We really do." "Then prove it," I said. "Prove it by respecting who I am and the choices I make." Marcus and I climbed into the helicopter. As it lifted off, I looked down at the terrace, at the guests watching, phones still raised, at my parents standing together, looking small and lost, at Caroline, who still hadn't apologized, standing apart from everyone else. The helicopter rose higher, and the country club became a collection of lights against the darkening Connecticut landscape. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, squeezing my hand. I thought about the question. 2 hours ago, I'd been standing at that party feeling utterly alone and humiliated. Now I was flying away with my husband, the man who'd crossed an ocean to defend me. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm free." He kissed my forehead. 3 more months until I'm back stateside for good. Well, for 6 months at least. Then they're sending me to Uganda. I'll visit, I promised. I've got vacation time saved up. I know you will. You always do. We flew through the evening sky toward the airport, where Marcus would catch a red-eye back to Europe and then onward to South Sudan, back to the children who needed him, the hospital that couldn't function without him, the work that defined him. And I would go back to Boston, to my apartment, to my job at the hospital, back to saving children's lives, in my own way, in my own city. But everything had changed. My family had seen the truth. They'd seen Marcus, seen our marriage certificate, seen the proof that I'd been telling the truth all along. The vindication felt better than I'd imagined, not because they'd been wrong, but because I'd stood my ground. I'd refused to shrink or apologize or explain myself away, and Marcus had shown up, literally and figuratively, had flown across the world to stand beside me when I needed him most. That was what real love looked like. Not flowers and chocolates, though Head brought those too, but showing up, defending your partner, making sacrifices, believing in each other even when the world didn't. 3 more months until our celebration ceremony. 3 months for my family to prove they'd learned something. 3 months to see if the humiliation would lead to growth. But whatever happened, I knew I'd be okay. Because I was Mrs. Sullivan, and that meant I wasn't alone anymore. The next few days were surreal. My phone exploded with messages. Some from relatives apologizing. Some from people I barely knew who'd somehow heard about the helicopter incident. Some from Caroline, defensive and angry, insisting I'd made her look bad on purpose. I didn't respond to most of them. I was exhausted, emotionally wrung out from the confrontation at the party. I went to work at Boston Children's Hospital and threw myself into my shifts, finding comfort in the familiar routine of checking vitals, administering medications, holding the hands of scared kids who just wanted their parents. On the 3rd day after the party, my parents showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't let them in. But something in my mother's face, the way she looked older somehow, made me open the door. They sat on my couch, looking out of place in my small 1-bedroom apartment with its thrift store furniture and walls covered in photos of me with my nursing school friends, me with Marcus during his rare visits, me at work with young patients who'd recovered and sent me thank you drawings. "We've been talking," my father said. "A lot. About everything. We enrolled in family therapy," my mother added, "and couples counseling. Our first session is next week." I sat in the armchair across from them, saying nothing. "We realized something," my father continued. "We've spent your entire life trying to control you, trying to make you into someone you're not, someone who fit our vision of success. You became a nurse, and we acted like it was a failure because it wasn't prestigious enough," my mother said, her voice thick. "But you save children's lives, Amelia. You hold babies who are fighting for every breath. You're there when families get the worst news of their lives. You do work that actually matters, and we treated it like it wasn't good enough. You found someone who loves you for exactly who you are," my father said. "Someone who shares your values, your compassion, your dedication to helping others. And we rejected him because he didn't fit our social expectations." I still said nothing. I wanted to hear all of it. "At the party," my mother said, wiping her eyes, "when Marcus showed up and I saw that marriage certificate, my first thought wasn't happiness for you. It was panic. Panic that we'd almost lost you. That we'd pushed so hard, been so cruel, that you might never forgive us." I've been thinking about how it'd feel if one of my patient's parents treated their child the way we treated you, I said quietly. If I saw a parent publicly humiliate their kid, question their sanity, make them feel worthless, I'd report them. I'd be disgusted. My mother sobbed. My father looked at his hands. I know, my mother whispered. We know. So what now? I asked. You apologize. Go to therapy for a few weeks and expect everything to be fixed. No, my father said firmly. We know it doesn't work like that. We know we've broken your trust, and trust takes time to rebuild. We're not asking for immediate forgiveness. We're asking for a chance to prove we can change. They pulled out their phones and showed me their calendar. Weekly therapy sessions scheduled for the next 6 months. They'd also signed up for volunteer work at a homeless shelter, something completely outside their usual charity gala comfort zone. We want to understand the kind of work you and Marcus do, my mother explained. Not just write checks from a distance, but actually show up and help people. It was more than I'd expected, but I was still cautious. The ceremony is in 3 months, I said. You're invited, but I need to see real change before then. Not just words, action. We understand, my father said. Thank you for giving us a chance. They left shortly after, and I sat alone in my apartment, processing everything. Part of me wanted to believe them, part of me was still hurt, still angry, still remembering the humiliation of standing on that terrace while they dissected my sanity for entertainment. My phone rang. Marcus, calling from South Sudan. How are you holding up? He asked, and just hearing his voice made me feel steadier. I told him about my parents' visit, about their promises of therapy and change. Do you believe them? He asked. I think I want to believe them, I said. But I also think Caroline was right about one thing. I've always wanted their approval, and maybe that's made me too willing to accept crumbs of affection. You don't need their approval, Marcus said gently. You're an incredible nurse, an incredible person, an incredible wife, with or without their validation. I know. Intellectually, I know that. But emotionally, it still hurts. Of course it does. They're your parents. You're allowed to want their love and support. Just don't compromise who you are to get it. We talked for another hour, about his work, about the children he was treating, about a little boy named Joseph who'd survived a bullet wound and was starting to walk again. Marcus' love for his work came through every word, and I felt grateful all over again that Head interrupted that work to fly to Connecticut for me. A week later, Brandon called. His wedding was in 2 months, a month before our celebration ceremony. I wanted to call personally to make sure you and Marcus know you're welcome, he said. Really welcome. Not just invited out of obligation. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. My dad has been, I don't know how to describe it, different, quieter. I think what happened really shook him. Has been talking about the importance of respecting people's choices, of not judging. It's weird hearing it from him, honestly. People can change, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it yet. Stephanie and I are really looking forward to meeting Marcus properly, without the helicopter drama, just as family. After we hung up, I felt a small shift in my chest. Maybe some relationships could be repaired. Maybe some family members were worth keeping. But then Carolyn texted, not an apology, just, I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. Everyone thinks I'm a terrible sister now. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I never wanted that. I wanted my sister to believe in me, to support me. That's all I ever wanted. She didn't reply. 2 weeks before Brandon's wedding, my parents invited me to lunch. We met at a small cafe in Cambridge. Nothing fancy, nothing designed to impress. My mother looked different. Less makeup, simpler clothes. My father looked tired but present in a way he hadn't been before. We wanted to update you, my mother said. Therapy is hard, really hard. We're confronting things about ourselves that we've avoided for decades. Our therapist asked us why we needed to control you so much. My father said. Why we couldn't just let you be happy. I didn't have a good answer. I realized I've been living my life for appearances, my mother admitted. Everything was about what people would think, how things would look, maintaining a certain image. And I tried to force you into that mold too. We went to the homeless shelter last week, my father said. First time volunteering. I served food to people who've lost everything, and it made me think about what Marcus does, how he's given up comfort and wealth to help people who have nothing, and I realized he's a better person than I am, my father continued. Has made better choices, and you chose him because you're a better person than we raised you to be. You became that despite us, not because of us. I felt my throat tighten. We can't undo what we did at that party, my mother said. We can't take back the years of judgment and control, but we're trying to be better. We're trying to be parents you'd actually want to have at your celebration ceremony. I do want you there, I admitted. Even after everything, I want you there. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you. The weeks passed. Work was busy. Summer in a pediatric ICU always is, with accidents and emergencies and children fighting for their lives. I fell into bed exhausted every night, but it was a good exhaustion, the kind that comes from making a difference. Marcus called when he could. Our conversations punctuated by bad connections and background noise from the refugee camp. But even through the static, I could hear the love in his voice. Brandon's wedding arrived. It was beautiful, elegant, without being ostentatious. I went alone since Marcus couldn't leave South Sudan. But my parents were there, and they made a point of sitting with me, of introducing me to people as their daughter who's a pediatric nurse, with pride in their voices that hadn't been there before. Caroline was there too, with Trevor. She avoided me most of the night, but during the reception, she finally approached. "Can we talk?" she asked, and I heard something in her voice I couldn't quite identify. Regret, maybe, or shame. We walked to a quiet corner of the venue. "I was jealous," she said without preamble. "Of you and Marcus. Of the way he looks at you like you're the only person in the world. Trevor and we got married because it made sense. Our families approved. It looked good on paper. But we don't have what you have. I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "No, don't apologize. I'm the one who was awful. I undermined you to Mom and Dad because I couldn't stand that you'd found something real while I was stuck in something hollow." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can fix my marriage. I don't know if I even want to. But I wanted to say, I'm sorry. Really sorry. You're my sister, and I should have supported you. Instead, I tried to tear you down." I looked at her. This person Id shared a childhood with, and I saw someone struggling with her own choices, her own disappointments. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I forgive you, but trust takes time to rebuild." "I know," she said. "I'll wait as long as it takes." We hugged awkwardly, and I felt a tiny crack in the wall Id built around my heart where she was concerned. The next month flew by. Preparations for our celebration ceremony kept me busy during my days off. Marcus' family had opened their Cape Cod estate for the event, and his mother had been incredible, handling most of the planning while keeping me updated on every decision. I'd met Marcus' parents briefly before, during one of his stateside visits, and they'd immediately welcomed me. They were warm, genuine people who cared more about character than status. His mother had been a teacher before retiring, and his father ran Sullivan Medical Technologies, but treated everyone with respect, from the janitors to the executives. "We're just thrilled Marcus found you," his mother told me over the phone one day while we discussed flower arrangements. "Hez always been so dedicated to his work, we worried he'd never find someone who understood his calling." "I do understand it," I said. "It's one of the things I love most about him. That's why you're perfect for him. You see his heart, not just his family name." 1 week before the ceremony, Marcus called with news. "I'm coming home early. he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. 3 days instead of arriving the morning of the ceremony. I want time with you before we have to share you with 40 guests. Really? You can do that. I trained 2 doctors to take over while I'm gone. The hospital is in good hands, and I need to see my wife. My heart swelled. I can't wait. Those 3 days before the ceremony were perfect. Marcus arrived at my apartment looking exhausted but happy. We spent the time doing normal things. Cooking dinner together, walking through Boston Common, watching bad movies on my couch. Just being together without the pressure of limited time or impending separations. I've been thinking, Marcus said one evening as we sat on my apartment's small balcony. After Uganda, I want to take a longer break. Maybe work stateside for a year. Spend real time with you, not just these brief visits. You'd be okay with that? I asked, surprised. Leaving the field work. I'd still be helping people. There are underserved communities right here in America that need good doctors. And I'd get to wake up next to you every morning. That sounds pretty good to me. I kissed him, tasting hope and future and possibility. The day before the ceremony, my parents arrived at the Cape Cod estate. I watched them carefully, still evaluating, still cautious. But they were respectful, helpful, and most importantly, they let Marcus' parents take the lead on hosting without trying to control anything. That evening, at the rehearsal dinner, my father stood to make a toast. 6 months ago, he said, I made a terrible mistake. I humiliated my daughter in public, questioned her judgment, and nearly lost her. I stood here tonight wanting to make amends, but I realized that's not what matters. What matters is what I say moving forward. He looked at Marcus and me. Amelia, you've built a life of purpose and meaning. You save children's lives every day. You married a man who shares your values and your compassion. I'm proud of you. Not for living up to some expectation I had, but for being exactly who you are. He raised his glass. To Amelia and Marcus, may your marriage be filled with the respect, trust, and love you both deserve. I saw my mother crying, but they were happy tears this time. As the evening wound down, I found a quiet moment with Marcus on the estate's terrace overlooking the ocean. Tomorrow, we do this officially, he said, pulling me close. In front of everyone who matters. Everyone who matters, I repeated. That's the key, isn't it? Figuring out who actually matters. And not wasting energy on people who don't, he agreed. We stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the waves crash against the shore. Tomorrow would be our celebration ceremony. Tomorrow, we'd commit to each other again, this time in front of family and friends who truly supported us. But tonight, we were just us. 2 people who'd found each other across a crowded conference hall, who'd built a relationship across continents and time zones, who'd fought for each other when it mattered most, and that was more than enough. The morning of the celebration ceremony dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect Cape Cod summer day that felt like a gift. I stood in the bedroom Marcus' mother had prepared for me, looking out at the ocean, and felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. My mother knocked softly before entering. She carried a box wrapped in simple paper. I wanted to give you this before the ceremony, she said. It's something I should have given you a long time ago. Inside was a journal, leather-bound and worn. My mother's handwriting filled the pages. I started this when you were born, she explained. Every important moment, every milestone, every time you did something that made me proud. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you. I started seeing only what I wanted you to be instead of who you were. I flipped through pages. My first day of kindergarten. The time I rescued a bird with a broken wing and nursed it back to health. My decision to go to nursing school. She'd written about all of it, and in these private pages, her pride came through clearly. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. Because I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid that if I supported your choices, you'd move even further away from what I thought your life should look like. I was controlling and manipulative, and I'm sorry. She helped me into my dress. A simple, elegant gown that felt right. Nothing ostentatious. Nothing designed to impress. Just beautiful. You look perfect, she said, and I heard truth in her voice, not performance. Downstairs, 40 guests were gathered on the estate's back lawn, facing the ocean. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle, white flowers everywhere, a string quartet playing softly. It was intimate and meaningful, exactly what Marcus and I had wanted. My father waited to walk me down the makeshift aisle. He looked at me with eyes that saw me. Really saw me. Maybe for the first time in my adult life. I don't deserve this honor, he said quietly. But I promise I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. You're my dad, I said simply. You'll always be my dad. We just need to figure out how to have a healthier relationship. I'd like that, he said, offering his arm. The ceremony was beautiful. Brandon and Stephanie were there, sitting in the front row. Several of my nursing colleagues had made the trip. Marcus' parents beamed with pride. My parents sat together, holding hands, tears streaming down their faces. And Marcus stood at the front, wearing a simple gray suit, looking at me like I was the only person in the world. We'd already done the legal part at the courthouse. These vows were about something else. About choosing each other in front of community, about building a life together, about commitment witnessed and celebrated. Marcus went first. Amelia. You loved me when my life was complicated and inconvenient. You never asked me to choose between you and my work. You understood that my calling to help others wasn't separate from my love for you, but part of what makes me who I am. His voice was steady, strong. You're the most compassionate person I've ever met. I've seen you hold dying children's hands and give their parents strength they didn't know they had. I've watched you fight for your patients with everything you have. And I've been honored beyond words that you chose to fight for us too. He took my hands. I promise to support your work, your dreams, your calling. I promise to show up for you, even when it means flying across an ocean. I promise to believe in you, even when others don't. And I promise to love you, exactly as you are, for the rest of my life. I was crying before I even started my vows. Marcus, you saw me when my own family couldn't. You valued my work when others dismissed it. You never tried to change me or mold me into someone I'm not. I squeezed his hands. You live your values every single day. You sacrifice comfort and wealth to save lives in places most people won't even visit. You're the best person I know, and the fact that you love me is the greatest gift I've ever received. My voice shook, but didn't break. I promise to support your calling, even when it takes you far away. I promise to be here when you come home. I promise to build a life with you that honors both of our work, both of our values. And I promise to love you, fiercely and completely, for the rest of my life. The officiant, a friend of Marcus from medical school, pronounced us husband and wife, again, officially, with witnesses who actually cared about us. Marcus kissed me, and I heard cheers and applause. But mostly I just felt his arms around me and knew I was exactly where I belonged. The reception was casual and joyful, no rigid seating charts, no boring speeches that went on too long, just good food, good music, and people who genuinely cared about us. A colleague from Doctors Without Borders, a doctor named Sarah Hode, worked with Marcus in Yemen, stood to share a story. I've known Marcus for 5 years, she said. I've watched him perform miracles with limited supplies, comfort families in their darkest moments, and work until he literally couldn't stand. But I've never seen him happier than when he talks about Amelia. She smiled at both of us. In the middle of a war zone, covered in dust and exhaustion, he'd get this look on his face when his phone had signal and he could call her. That look, that love, it reminded all of us why we do this work. Because connection and love are what make us human, even in inhumane circumstances. One of my nursing colleagues, a woman named Hannah worked with for 6 years, stood next. Amelia is the nurse every parent hopes their child gets. She's the one who stays late when a kid is scared. She's the one who holds babies all night when they're in pain. She's the one who cries with families when they get bad news and celebrates with them when they get good news. Hannah raised her glass. And Marcus, you're the person who saw all of that and loved her for it. Thank you for seeing what makes her special. My parents approached during the dancing. They'd been quiet most of the evening, respectful and present but not dominating the celebration. Can I have this dance? My father asked. We moved to the dance floor, and he held me carefully, like I was something precious that might break. I've spent the last few months in therapy talking about control, he said. About why I needed everything to look a certain way. My therapist asked me when I stopped listening to you, and I realized it was when you were about 10. You wanted to be a veterinarian, and I told you to think bigger. To be a doctor or a lawyer. Something impressive. He took a shaky breath. You learned then that your dreams weren't good enough for me. And you kept learning that lesson over and over, until you stopped sharing your dreams at all. I did, I admitted. I stopped telling you things that mattered because I knew you'd find them lacking. I'm sorry, he said. Not just for the party, though that was inexcusable, but for all the years before that, for making you feel like you had to earn my love instead of just receiving it. Thank you, I said. For doing the work, for trying to change. I'm your father. It's the least I can do. When the song ended, my mother cut in. Your turn, she said, and my father gracefully stepped aside. My mother and I danced, and she spoke quietly. I talked to Caroline yesterday. She's thinking about leaving Trevor. I know, I said. She told me. I think she's been unhappy for a long time. She did what we wanted, married who we approved of, and lost herself in the process. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I did that to her. I pushed so hard for her to be perfect, to marry well, to look successful, and I made her miserable. She made her own choices, I said gently. You influenced them, but she still chose. I'm trying to do better with her too, to actually listen instead of direct. It's harder than I thought it would be. Change is hard, I agreed, but it's worth it. Later, I found Caroline sitting alone near the edge of the property, looking out at the ocean. Hey, I said, sitting beside her. Hey, she replied. Beautiful ceremony. You and Marcus are perfect together. Thank you. We sat in silence for a moment. I'm leaving Trevor, she said suddenly. I told him this morning. He wasn't surprised. I think he's relieved. Honestly, we've been playing house for 5 years, and neither of us has been happy. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. I'm not. Well, I'm sad that I wasted 5 years, but I'm not sorry to be ending something that was never right to begin with. She turned to look at me, watching you and Marcus, seeing how he looks at you, how he shows up for you. That's what I want. Not what looks good on paper, but what feels right in my heart. You'll find it, I said, now that you know what you're looking for. I hope so, she paused. Can we try again? As sisters? I know I have a lot to make up for. We can try, I agreed. Slowly, with honesty this time. She hugged me, and it felt more real than any interaction we'd had in years. As the evening drew to a close, Marcus and I stood on the terrace, watching our guests dance and laugh and celebrate. His arm was around my waist, and I leaned into him, feeling complete. We did it, he said. We built something real, despite everything trying to tear us apart. We did. I agreed. I have to leave for Uganda in 2 weeks, he said quietly. 6 months this time, but after that, I'm taking that break, working stateside for a while. I'll visit. I promised. I'll save every vacation day. I know you will. You always do. We watched the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. You know what the best part is? I asked. What? We don't need anyone's approval anymore. We just need each other. That's all we've ever needed, he said, kissing the top of my head. The party continued into the night, but Marcus and I slipped away, walking down to the beach. We took off our shoes and walked along the water's edge, the sand cool beneath our feet, the waves a constant rhythm. Happy? He asked. Happier than I've ever been. Not because we proved everyone wrong or because my family finally accepts us, but because I'm with someone who sees me, all of me, and loves me exactly as I am. That's all I've ever wanted to do, he said simply. We walked until the estate was just lights in the distance, until it was just us and the ocean and the stars. And in that moment, I understood something important. Family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who show up for you, who believe in you, who fight for you when the world tries to tear you down. Id found that family. In Marcus, in his parents, in colleagues like Sarah and Hannah, in Brandon and Stephanie, even, slowly, rebuilding it with my parents and Caroline. But most importantly, Id found it in myself. The strength to stand firm in my truth, the courage to set boundaries, the wisdom to know my worth didn't depend on anyone else's validation. And that was the greatest gift of all. 3 months after the ceremony, I was sitting in my apartment in Boston when my phone rang. It was Marcus, calling from Uganda. "How's your day been?" he asked, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Long," I admitted. "We had a 7-year-old come in with severe asthma. Touch and go for a while. But she's stable now. Her parents are beside themselves with relief." "You saved another one," he said proudly. "We all did. It's never just one person." "I know. But you're the one who stays late, who holds their hands, who makes them feel safe. Don't diminish that." We talked for an hour about our days, our work, our lives half a world apart, but the distance felt less painful now, because we knew it was temporary, because we trusted each other completely. 4 more months, he said. Then I'm home for a year, working at Mass General, helping build their trauma program. I already signed the contract. Really? You're really doing this? I'm really doing this. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to eat breakfast together. I want to be there when you come home from hard shifts. I want a year of normal. Normal sounds perfect, I said, my heart full. After we hung up, I found myself thinking about the past year, about how much had changed since that engagement party at the country club. My relationship with my parents was still a work in progress. They were trying, genuinely trying. Weekly therapy had become part of their routine. They volunteered at the homeless shelter every Saturday. They asked about my work and actually listened to the answers. They'd stopped trying to control my life and started trying to understand it. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still times when old patterns tried to resurface. But when that happened, we talked about it. We worked through it. We didn't just sweep it under the rug and pretend everything was fine. My mother had become someone I could call when I had a rough day. Not to hear platitudes or advice, but just to hear her say, "I'm sorry. That sounds really hard. I'm proud of how you handle it." My father had started asking about my patients, about the children I cared for, had even made a significant donation to the hospital in my name to fund a program providing support for families of critically ill children. They were becoming the parents it always needed. Not the ones who demanded perfection, but the ones who offered support. Caroline and I had rebuilt our relationship slowly. We met for coffee every few weeks, honest conversations replacing the competitive dynamic we'd fallen into. Shed left Trevor, and the divorce was painful but necessary. Shed started therapy too, working through her own issues with perfectionism and people-pleasing. I'm figuring out who I am when I'm not trying to impress anyone. She told me one day, "It's harder than I thought it would be, but worth it," I said. "Definitely worth it." Shed even started volunteering at a women's shelter, using her legal skills to help women escaping domestic violence. Shed found purpose outside of social status, and I watched her transform into someone I actually respected. Brandon and Stephanie had become real friends. They visited Boston occasionally, and we'd have dinner and laugh about life. Brandon had stood up to his father more, setting boundaries about family expectations. He and Stephanie were planning to start a family, and they talked about raising their children with different values than the ones Brandon had grown up with. "We want them to know they're loved for who they are, not what they achieve," Stephanie said. "We want them to feel safe being themselves. That's the greatest gift you can give them," I told her. But the biggest change was in me. I'd stopped seeking validation from people who'd proven they couldn't give it consistently. I'd learned to trust my own judgment. I'd learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I'd learned that real love doesn't require you to shrink or apologize or explain yourself away. Real love sees you and celebrates you and shows up for you when it matters most. Marcus had taught me that. Not with grand gestures, though the helicopter arrival had certainly been dramatic, but with consistent, daily choices to prioritize our relationship, with satellite phone calls from war zones, with believing in me when my own family didn't, with flying across the world to defend me. That was love. Not the fairy tale version, but the real version. Messy and complicated, and built on trust and respect and partnership. I thought about that day at the country club often, not because I enjoyed remembering the humiliation, but because it had been a turning point. The day I stopped hiding who I was to please people who'd never accept me anyway. The day I stood on that terrace and let Marcus show everyone exactly who we were together. The day I claimed my own story. Sometimes people asked me if I'd forgiven my parents for what they did. It was a complicated question. I'd forgiven them in the sense that I wasn't carrying anger anymore. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending it never happened. It meant accepting what happened, seeing how they'd worked to change, and choosing to move forward with appropriate boundaries and realistic expectations. Some relationships could be fully restored. Some couldn't, and that was okay. The important thing was knowing the difference and not wasting energy trying to fix what was fundamentally broken. Caroline's relationship with our parents was more damaged than mine. They were working on it, but the years of pressure and control had left deeper scars. Maybe they'd fully heal, maybe they wouldn't. But at least everyone was being honest now. At least everyone was trying. I looked around my apartment, at the life I'd built. Photos of Marcus and me covered the walls. Thank you drawings from young patients hung on the fridge. My nursing degree was framed, not hidden away. Evidence of a life lived on my own terms, by my own values. In 4 months, Marcus would be home. We'd have a year of waking up together, of cooking meals and watching movies and doing all the ordinary things that made a life. Then He'd probably return to field work, because that was his calling, and I'd support it, because that was love. But we'd also carve out time for us, for visits and video calls and building a relationship that could withstand distance and difficulty. Because we'd already proven we could do hard things. We'd already shown up for each other when it would have been easier to walk away. As I got ready for bed that night, I thought about what I'd want to tell my younger self, the version of me who'd stood at that engagement party, humiliated and hurt, wondering if anyone would ever truly see her. I'd tell her to hold on, to trust herself, to know that the right people would eventually show up and the wrong people would eventually show their true colors. I'd tell her that standing firm in her truth, even when everyone doubted her, was the bravest thing she'd ever do. I'd tell her that love looks like someone who believes you, who defends you, who flies across the world just to stand beside you. And I'd tell her that she was enough, exactly as she was, and anyone who couldn't see that didn't deserve space in her life. That was the life lesson I carried from that day. That was what I wanted everyone to understand. Your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. You don't need to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. You don't need to apologize for being exactly who you are. The right people will celebrate you, not just tolerate you. They'll fight for you, not against you. They'll show up when it matters, not just when it's convenient. And if your family can't do that, if the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally instead try to control and diminish you, then you have every right to set boundaries, to demand respect, to build a chosen family that actually supports you. Blood doesn't automatically earn trust. Family has to be earned through actions, not just claimed through genetics. Some people will never understand your choices. They'll mock you, doubt you, try to make you feel small. But their doubt says nothing about you and everything about them. Stand firm. Surround yourself with people who see your value. And never, ever compromise who you are to fit someone else's expectations. Because the right person, the one who truly loves you, will move mountains to be by your side. They'll step out of helicopters if that's what it takes. They'll defend you to anyone who tries to tear you down. They'll love you not despite who you are, but because of it. And that love, that real, honest, unconditional love, is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth everything. I crawled into bed, my phone showing a goodnight text from Marcus, sent from a hospital tent in Uganda where he was saving lives one surgery at a time. "Good night, Mrs. Sullivan. I love you more than words can say." I smiled, typing back, "Good night, Dr. Sullivan. I love you too. 4 more months. 4 more months until wed. Have our year of normal. 4 more months of distance before we got time together. But we'd make it. We always did. Because that's what real love does. It endures. It shows up. It believes. And I was living proof that when you stop seeking validation from people who'll never give it, and start building a life based on your own values and choices, magic happens. Not fairy tale magic, real magic. The kind that changes you from the inside out. The kind that teaches you your worth and gives you strength and reminds you that you are enough. Always have been. Always will be. And no one, not my parents, not my sister, not anyone, could take that away from me ever again. So if you're reading this, if you're struggling with family who doesn't see you or value you, if you're tired of trying to earn love that should be freely given, remember this: you are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not the problem. And someday, maybe someone will show up for you the way Marcus showed up for me. But more importantly, you'll show up for yourself. You'll stand firm in your truth. You'll refuse to shrink. And that will be the day your real life begins. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own happiness? Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who should have believed in you from the start? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories like this, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're enough exactly as they are. Your support means everything and helps these stories reach people who need them most. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the courage to stand firm in your truth, the strength to set boundaries with people who don't respect you, and the wisdom to recognize real love when it arrives in your life. Until next time, remember, you are worthy of love that celebrates you, not just tolerates you. Don't settle for anything less.